Welcome back to the course titled Qualitative Research Methods, offered through the National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning, Ministry, sponsored by the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Government of India. My name is Aradhana Malik. I am helping you with this course, and we have talked about various things. In the previous lecture, we discussed what interpretivist and constructivist paradigms were. We actually very briefly touched upon what interpretivism and constructivism is, and what are the challenges to interpretivist philosophy, and what are the responses to these challenges. In this particular lecture, we will discuss specifically, we will discuss interpretivism, and we will discuss the concept of Verstehen. It's a German word. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I took the pronunciation from a link and I provided that link in the slides. So I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It's pronounced as Verstehen as far as I know. So let's go through this. Verstehen. Okay. What is Verstehen? Verstehen is a German term that means to understand, perceive, know, and comprehend the nature and significance of a phenomenon. To grasp or comprehend the meaning intended or expressed by another. Weber used the term to refer to the social scientist's attempt to understand both the intention and the context of human action. Okay, why human beings behave the way they behave, and what is the context that governs how human beings behave the way they behave. What do human beings aim to achieve? When we talk about intention, we are talking about the ultimate desired output of an action. We are talking about what we want to get out of our actions. Why do we behave the way we behave, and what the context that governs our decision or our rationale for behaving the way we behave. So we are going one step back. We are also studying the context that determines why we behave the way we behave. Okay, and the context can help us gain an understanding of various of the reasons for various actions. Okay, all right. Verstehen clarified. What is Verstehen? Verstehen is not an attempt by the inquirer to get inside the head of another to understand the context the other was rooted in. So when we talk about Verstehen, we are not talking about thinking like the person who was engaged in or who acted in a particular manner. We don't need to get inside the head of a person. Verstehen refers to our understanding of the world that is a result of our experience with it. So Verstehen is our understanding, how we understand the world. That is, the world is also being created, the history, like we discussed in the previous lecture. History is a result of our interaction with our environment. So Verstehen is also, it refers to our understanding of the world that we are in, and how our understanding of the world we are in contributes to the way the world we are in responds to us, and contributes to how the world we are in shapes up as a result of how we understand it. Now this sounds very complicated, but it's really, if we think about these different steps, you know, it's not so complex. It's very logical. I am who I am as a result of, one, what I believe, what I bring to the table, what I was born with. Two, what I believe about myself. 3, what I give to the world, what I believe about the world that I am living in. 4, how what I give to the world, and what I give to the world is dependent on what I believe the world wants from me. Then how the world receives what I give to it, and how the world responds to me as a result of what I give to it. Okay, so it's a combination of various things. So we are also contributing to the environment that we are studying just by virtue of being in it. We have a perception of the context we are in. We understand the context we are in a particular manner. We communicate our understanding of the context we are in and through our actions within that context. Okay. So that in turn sends out signals into the environment that are received by the environment, and then the matter is out of our hands. How the environment perceives what we give to it, how much of what we give to the environment is actually received by the environment, how the environment responds to us as a result of what we give to it is not in our hands, and that in turn comes back to us, and that feeds into our understanding of the environment that we are in. So it's a very complex process. Okay, all right, and that is this whole process of understanding all these different steps that I laid out in front of you is called Verstehen. Okay. According to Schutz, 1967, Verstehen could also be explored as an epistemological problem. Verstehen is the grounds from which all inquiry starts and from within which it can only be carried out. We need to understand the context, we need to situate whatever we are studying within a context, and only then can we start any kind of inquiry regarding the context that we want to study, regarding the phenomenon that we want to study, because phenomena do not occur in isolation. Phenomena occur within specific contexts, and unless we understand how phenomena are situated in the context and how they are affecting the context and how the context is responding to the phenomena that we are studying, we are not going to be able to understand what is really going on. Okay? Verstehen as a process. The process by which we make sense or interpret our everyday world. Verstehen is the process by which the social scientist attempts to make sense of the first. So, the process by which we attempt to make sense of the process by which we understand the world. So, we are going one step back. The why of interpretations and the interconnectedness and situatedness of interpretations is called Verstehen. These statements are just repetitive if you think about them. Okay. Types of hermeneutical interpretations of Verstehen. Various hermeneutical interpretations are: the first one is objective validation hermeneutics. Objective validation hermeneutics assumes that meaning is a determinate, object-like entity waiting to be discovered in a text, a culture, or the mind of a social actor. So, when we try and understand the world, we feel that the meaning is already there. All we need to do is discover it. It's hidden somewhere, and there is one meaning that's hidden, and as we start peeling the layers of the context that we are studying, eventually the one true single interpretation meaning will emerge. That is one way of understanding the world around us, that there is only one meaning and it's covered in layer after layer after layer of context and various interpretations. So, if we really want to understand the one true meaning, all we have to do is, of course, take all the necessary steps to peel away these additional layers, and only then, till we are getting more than one interpretation, that means we have not arrived at the true meaning. So, as long as the interpretations keep changing, the true meaning has not revealed itself. There is one meaning that is hidden somewhere, and only we can be sure of that one meaning only when this meaning has only one interpretation, irrespective of the person who is studying it, irrespective of how it is studied, how it is revealed. Okay. So, that is called objective validation hermeneutics. The second type of hermeneutical interpretation is ontological hermeneutics. It claims that if our interpretations seem implausible, or if they are not understood by our interlocutors, there is no verification procedure we can fall back on. We can only continue to offer interpretations till those interpretations are accepted, and till many people, or till many of the receivers of our interpretations keep, till they acknowledge that the interpretation that has been received is really the true interpretation. So, we cannot keep digging to find the true meaning. That is what ontological hermeneutics does. It claims that if our interpretations seem unbelievable, if they are not accepted, if they are not understood, if they are not acknowledged, all we can do is we can keep looking at the phenomenon from different angles, and we can keep offering different interpretations till we come to an interpretation that becomes acceptable. And it's all a complex game of different interpretations, and the most acceptable interpretation is what we should hope to arrive at. That is one way of looking at it. Okay. Examples of interpretivist persuasion. Clifford Hertz talks about the interpretive theory of culture, and he says that the structuralist program is firmly rooted in the logical empiricist's bid to find the real meaning of myth, ceremony, and other cultural artifacts. So, he says that every culture has these myths, they have ceremonies, they have cultural artifacts, and it is the responsibility of the empirical researcher to find out the real, the one true meaning of behind each of these cultural artifacts. For the structuralist, the categories and structures of culture provide powerful explanatory devices accounting for the behaviors of the members of a group or society. So, the meaning is rooted in the explanatory devices, the categories of culture, the structures of culture are the ones that help us explain the behaviors of members within that society or group. The structural functional research frameworks are reductionist in that they claim to discover the one true interpretation lying behind or beneath the complexity of appearances. So, we are talking about the objective validation hermeneutics. Okay. So, there is one true interpretation, and the structural functional research frameworks reduce the number of interpretations to one. They claim to discover the one true single interpretation. For example, what makes Indians happy, or how are Indian households structured. Now, if you are an Indian listening to this, or a person from any community, it could be Indians, it could be Sri Lankans, it could be Bangladeshis, it could be Nepalese, it could be anyone. What makes Bengalis happy? What makes Himachalis happy? So, so that is it only one thing? We all follow the same cultural pattern, but then, or we belong to the same culture, but can what we do be boiled down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, one single list of things that make us happy? Maybe, maybe not. I choose to disagree. You can make your own decision. Okay. Now, George Herbert Mead, Herbert Bloomer, etc. talked about symbolic interpretation. Symbolic interactionism. The premises behind symbolic interactionism are that human beings act toward the physical objects and other beings in their environment on the basis of the meanings that these things have for them. So, we as human beings assign different meanings to different things in our environments. We see, like I told you a little while ago, we see the environment in a certain way. How we respond to the environment depends on how we see the environment. Okay, it depends on what we see in the environment. It depends on what meaning the environment has for us. These meanings derive from the social interaction between and among individuals. Communication is symbolic because we communicate via languages and other symbols. Further, in communicating, we create or produce significant symbols. So, how we assign meanings to the different objects in our environment depends on our interactions with them. It depends on the feeling of comfort or discomfort we have with them. It depends on what our experience with these objects has been. And that is what contributes to our meaning making. Okay. Now, and these are derived in and through social interaction. These meanings are established and modified through an interpretive process. The actor or the person within the context selects, checks, suspends, regroups and transforms the meanings in light of the situation in which he or she is placed and the direction of his action. Meanings are used and revised as instruments for the guidance and formation of action. So, we select what we want to respond to, we select the stimuli that we want to respond to, we check them, we suspend our meaning making, we may regroup things, we want to see a whole picture, a bombardment of stimuli, we are being bombarded by all kinds of stimuli from our environments, and we filter out the meaning making, the sense making stimuli from the environment, we group them, we check them, we may suspend our checking, we may regroup them because the picture that is emerging is not so meaningful. Then once the picture that is emerging from the stimuli that we have initially filtered out becomes more meaningful, then we may go back to the original database of stimuli that we had received and pull out some more stimuli, send some more or filter out some more stimuli, so that the picture we receive makes some sense to us in the light of what we know, what we can understand, what we can express. Okay. Meanings are used and revised as instruments for the guidance and formation of action. So, once we understand, once we know what the context that we are in means to us, based on our understanding of the context we are in, we decide to act in a certain way, which means that we decide to send out signals, we decide to respond to the meaning that we derive from the environment that we are in, from the environment that we are situated in, or from the context that we are in, the context that we are trying to study. And then we send out some signals. We behave in a certain way, we act in a certain way. Okay. What do symbolic interactionists do? They regard human beings as purposive agents who engage in minded, self-reflexive behavior, who confront a world that they must interpret in order to act, rather than a set of environmental stimuli to which they are forced to respond. So, symbolic interactionists believe that human beings are purposive agents. We have intentions. We do something with the intention of achieving a particular goal. It may be very small. It may just be in removing the disturbance from my environment. It may just be, if I'm sitting here and there's a fly on my head, I'll do this to get the fly to go away. And or I may just move my shoulders in order to feel more comfortable. I may say something to ward off more discomfort from my environment. I may decide not to respond to certain stimuli because I am not comfortable with the response I may expect as a result of my response. So, silence is also purposive, but there is an intention behind it. Now, Mikhail Bakhtin, a noted Russian philosopher, I have not mentioned his name here, talked about the emotional, volitional aspect of a human utterance. And the credit for introducing us to Bakhtin goes to Professor Roy Wood, who of Denver University, who introduced me to and many more like me to qualitative research methods. And Bakhtin talked about the basic utterance, and he said that everything that we say has an intention behind it, and there are feelings associated with it, and that is what we are trying to say here. Symbolic interactionist perspective. Symbolic interactionists talk from the perspective, they have a purpose. They believe that human beings are purposive agents who engage in minded, so they filter out signals. They don't respond to anything and everything, but they carefully select what they want to respond to. Self-reflexive behavior. They learn from every interaction, and they learn from every response they get to every action they have. Self-reflexive behavior, who confront a world that they must interpret in order to act, rather than a set of environmental stimuli to which they are forced to respond. So, they are constantly evaluating the impact of their actions. That's what symbolic interactionists do. They constantly evaluate the impact of their interactions on the environment that they are in, and every one of their interactions is goal driven. It has a purpose behind it. The second point is they pay careful attention to the overt behaviors and behavior settings of actors and their interaction. So, not only are we evaluating how our actions are impacting our environment, we are also constantly evaluating how the actions of the other people in our environment are impacting the environment that we coexist in. Okay. Symbolic interactionism requires that the inquirer actively enter the worlds of people being studied in order to see the situation as it is seen by the actor, observing what the actor takes into account, observing how he interprets what is taken into account. So, when we talk about symbolic interactionism, we are talking about not getting into the heads of people we are studying, or into the heads of the people who are part of the phenomena that we are studying, but we talk about some amount of perspective. Familiarity with the perspective that is driving the actions of the people we are studying. Okay. Another example of interpretivist persuasion is the interpretive interactionism. So, interpretive interactionism must explicitly engage in cultural criticism. Interpretive interactionism it talks about the cultural criticism. It aims to always subvert the meaning of a text to show how it's dominant, and negotiated meanings can be opposed. It must look at interpretive interactionism explicitly engages in critiques, in cultural critiques based on the culture that that the phenomenon that is being studied is situated in. It aims to subvert the meaning of a text to see how the dominant and the negotiated meanings can be opposed. What is there in the meaning of the text that how the dominant meanings can be opposed is what it tries to study. It exposes the ideological and political meanings circulate within the text, particularly those which hide or displace racial, class, ethnic and gender biases. So, it exposes the ideological meanings, it shows how different meanings acquire positions of power within the text, how different meanings within the text highlight certain things and hide certain things, and at the expense of being politically correct. I will take a very small example of how news items are portrayed. For example, a news item talks about, a newspaper is trying to sell. Of course, the purpose of any business is to make money, and newspapers need to sell. So, let's take the example of a natural calamity, say an earthquake. An earthquake occurs and the news item does not talk about how many people died. Men, women, children, elderly, all of us are people. But the news item says 15 children dead in a building collapse due to an earthquake. The total number of people who died was probably 100. But certain things are highlighted. 15 children died, 23 women died, say 56 or sorry, I hope I am getting the numbers right, say 50 elderly died. So, these kinds of things, what do we highlight, what do we hide, what do we focus our attention on, what do we choose to not attend to, is what interpretive interactionism studies. It also analyzes how texts address the problems of presence, lived experience, the real and its representations, and the issues of subjects, authors and their intentionalities. So, it analyzes how what is written addresses real live experience and what the intentionality, what the intention of the person writing about this was. So, it is all about exposing these different biases, these different plays of power in and through words. That is what interpretive interactionism does. That is all we have time for in this lecture. We will continue with constructivism in the next class. So, thank you very much for listening.